Hello, Exeter, and today on our spotlight we have Dan Chartrand.
Out of college, so doing that, and then after that I bent over.
Pleasure to have you on show one. Dan,
Thank you.
it is exciting to have you here. The man behind Water Street Books. You've been on the select board.
Yeah.
I got an experience of you participating in this summer's Frederick Douglass community speech reading.
Yeah.
Am I missing anything else?
We'll figure it out along the way.
We'll figure it out along the way.
Yeah, we'll figure it out.
So I'm curious as to why someone would have came here to Exeter and decided, all right, I'm going to start a bookstore.
Yeah.
Of all things, a bookstore too.
Yeah.
And your mission goal, independent books for independent minds. I'm kind of curious behind the thinking of that as well.
That's been one of the missions over the years. Our most recent iteration of mission is building a diverse and vibrant community around the written word. So that's our current mission. I opened the store in 1991. I had worked in the book and publishing industry for 10 years before that. I had worked in a couple different bookstores, one in St. Paul, Minnesota, one in Cambridge, Massachusetts, Harvard Square. So I kind of learned my book selling chops at those two stores. I worked in a publishing house. I worked at Houghton Mifflin for 15 months. And then after that, I spent 3 years working at the New England Booksellers Association, working as their executive director. And so that 10 years of apprenticeship qualified me to head north from Boston and open a bookstore in the seacoast of New Hampshire. Originally, I was going to open that store in Portsmouth, but I kind of tripped over Exeter while I was wandering around the seacoast, and I fell in love with the town, and I opened the bookstore here, thank God, because Exeter is my kind of town.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. Now, normally when I'm used to, at least when people are talking books, the written word, I see a lot more being spun around, like a lot more being talked about, or a lot more detail being talked about than what I'm used to in film and television. Mm-hmm. Depending on the entity, some people have specific goals. That might not necessarily be a bad thing, but there are certain details or subjects to avert, like if you're going to be in more family friendly material.
We've never worried too much about that. There's a long tradition in the book industry of free expression, First Amendment, attention paid to First Amendment rights. We try hard not to be what's the right word? We try hard not to be the censor. It's our job to, put together a selection of books that we think our community might be interested in, and we'd rather push the boundaries of what they're interested in than kind of hang back and stay safe. So it's always been an eclectic mix. It's always informed by what we think our patrons will be looking for. So, yeah, we don't worry too much about it, what someone else thinks is appropriate.
Yeah. And so I take it that Exeter, like right off the bat, was pretty welcoming to.
The timing of opening the store in 1991 was good. There had been a bookstore on Water Street that had kind of, over the years, morphed into a stationery store, Batchelder's, and they were just really making the decision in the early 90s to become solely a stationery store and not carry books any longer. They had been known as Batchelder's Books for a long time. As they moved more towards stationery, more and more of the burden for supplying trade books to the community was falling on the Academy's bookstore over on Spring Street.
Yeah.
And they really didn't have the budget to stock that store for the community. Their primary purpose was to stock the store for the students and faculty. So we kind of found ourselves in a sweet spot in time.
Nice.
Where there was a need for a great independent trade bookstore. And we opened on August 10th, 1991. So,
Wow, congratulations.
yeah, and we're celebrating our 30th anniversary this fall.
Nice.
If the pandemic will allow us to.
Yeah. So 30 years too. That's a huge. That's exponential. I mean, I've been in the film industry for 12 years and I've seen big changes, but you've been in it for like twice that time in the book industry.
Yeah.
I mean, I mean, how has the time, within the time passing, how has that affected?
A lot has changed and then a lot hasn't. You know, so we still are primarily servicing readers through, physical books. We do have options for, we have an audio service that people can subscribe to through our website. Our website, by the way, is waterstreetbooks.com. So you can subscribe to that audio service through our website. It's called Libro FM, and it supports the bookstore if you subscribe to that. And that's different than when we opened. A lot of, some people read on devices now, and we support that as well. But most of our sort of community building is around the physical book, and that's remained the same across those 30 years. We're agnostic in terms of how people read, but that seems to be what people value us for, is the provision of those physical books in a community setting.
Yeah.
And the ways we do the community piece is, we really we curate the store to a high degree. The staff does staff pick write-ups where they will say, this is a great book and this is why you should read it. We also do a full, before the pandemic, we had a very full author event schedule. So again, building that community by bringing people together in support of a particular book and author. So a lot of that has remained consistent across the 30 years. What has changed is sort of a lot of the behind the scenes stuff, where, for instance, when we opened, we would look up stock availability on a title we didn't have in stock on a little microfiche, and we'd kind of like move that around, and it would magnify the little negative of the. And now, of course, everything's sourced through websites that our distributors put together, and we can see in real time what stock they have. So. That's an example of a huge change. So there's a lot of behind-the-scenes changes in terms of the technology of the industry, but what we do has remained remarkably constant across the 30 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
That is very exciting. Like, pretty cool too.
Yeah. I mean, physical books in a physical space, a gorgeous physical space. We've been in the Carlisle building the entire 30 years. My original landlord was a guy named Peter Olney, who gave me my first shot, and he still lives in the area. My most recent landlord are the husband and wife team, Elliot Berkowitz and Nancy Phillips, who are the people behind the Pearpoint Group that own a number of buildings in downtown Exeter, and they're great landlords as well. Peter was a great landlord to start with. Elliot and Nancy are great landlords now. So.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
And so you've been involved with the town as well. You've had your involvement outside of the bookstore.
I did a 6-year run on the select board. I also served for a year on the budget recommendation committee.
Yeah.
So that's one way that I've tried to give back by serving on in-town government. I've also been on some different boards and for nonprofits. Currently, I'm on the board for Riverwoods, which is a huge part of the life of Exeter. They opened, I think 3 years after I opened. They opened in 1994. So they just celebrated their 25th anniversary in Exeter.
It's exciting.
Yeah, and that's, the Riverwoods is, of course, the continuing care retirement community that now also has locations in Durham and Manchester. So I serve on that board. I serve on the editorial board for the Seacoast Media Group, who publish the Exeter newsletter and the Portsmouth Herald, amongst other publications. And they're, of course, the Seacoast Online website people. So yeah, I try to give back and try to be involved in the community. That was something that I always thought was really important. Not just take, but also give of my time.
Yeah. And the Riverwoods, I think that's something we haven't yet really talked about or really it's been brought up on the show yet. But just, so the audience has a little ideas to what goes into the Riverwoods or why it started.
Well, it was the original vision was a small group of people who wanted to age in place on the seacoast together and live in community. That was the original vision for Riverwoods, and that vision still informs their work today. I remember Rosemary Coffin was one of the people, and Mrs. Hatch. Those were two of the folks that were at that original very small table that launched Riverwoods. We have a world-class continuing care retirement community in Exeter, and it's one of the best in the industry. And it really is one of the best because it was started with that vision of living in community and being cared for, all the way through your lifespan.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a great organization. It's great to be able to give back to them.
Yeah. That's fantastic.
And the time on the select board was great. I had a few things I wanted to accomplish, and it was kind of encourage more commercial development in those corridors set aside for that commercial development. I also wanted to accelerate our investment in infrastructure projects, especially water and sewer, because in the low interest environment that we have currently, that we've been in for the last 10 years, I felt it was really important to get a lot done while money was relatively inexpensive. And then the third thing I'd hoped to accomplish was, working towards regionalizing municipal services across towns. I accomplished the first two things, or, worked with my colleagues on the board and the town manager, Rustine, to accomplish those first two things, but we didn't get very far on the regionalization piece. Local control is a long tradition. It's an expensive tradition, but it's a long tradition, and it was hard to convince some of my colleagues and the voters that that was a good way to go. So that remains to be done. Those were really the three things that I had hoped to accomplish on the select board.
Yeah.
And all in the service of making Exeter a more affordable place to live by stabilizing or even reducing the property tax rate in Exeter.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was kind of my impetus for being involved.
All right.
They had a very specific mission.
Yeah.
And once it became clear that 2 out of 3 were going to get done, I decided to step aside and let someone younger have a shot at it. I was served on a board where everyone was older than 50. That's no longer the case. We have a much younger select board now, and I think that's good.
Yeah.
I think they've got maybe they take a little bit of a longer view, being slightly younger.
Yeah.
So I think we have a great select board right now.
That's great.
Yeah.
And so, in 30 years, I can picture that Exeter has impressed you in some way, not just to stay here for 3 decades, but also to get involved with the town.
Yeah.
In your time, you've also seen a lot of change here too.
In 2038, we'll be celebrating 400 years of Exeter. The town was founded in 1638. I think I have that date right. If I got that wrong, Barbara Rimkunis, I apologize. So we're just a few years away from our 400th anniversary, and yes, a lot has changed across those 400 years, but again, a lot has remained constant. It's always been a hub for mercantile activity, and it still is. There's still a lot of commercial activity in Exeter's downtown. It is very much not a moribund downtown like some old towns are. It's remained very vital, and a lot of that is because the people that live in this town they're partial to their town. They want to support businesses in their town. They tend not to go to national chains. They tend to support independent businesses to a large degree. And we've never seen that more clearly than during the pandemic, when we've actually seen an increase in our activity within our reading community. People have sought us out more during the pandemic, not less. And we've worked very hard to develop safe models for them to be working and reading with us in community. So that's been very gratifying to see, once again, how dedicated the people of this town are to their Main Street, downtown, independent businesses.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really remarkable. We're very grateful for that.
That is.
And I think that's been consistent across those 400 years. I think Exeter people have always been partial to the businesses that are located in Exeter. They appreciate that commitment to the community.
That's stupendous. All right, Dan, thank you again.
It's a pleasure.
Yeah, and if there's any last words you'd like to share.
No. Thank you for inviting me to do this with you, Garrett. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
All right.
All right, Exeter. And you heard it. If you're interested in being in the spotlight, or if you have a recommendation for us, please feel free to contact us at extvg@exeternh.gov. Thank you, and have a great day.